Welcome to the LowCarbUSA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining again today. We have a very special guest, Dr. Ben Bochicchio, with us. And we wanted to talk to him. He so graciously invited us down to the beach house, so you can kind of tell we're beachy, the gracious host. And we had somebody come visit us who we just interviewed. It should be the previous podcast. And Andrew was telling us about how he'd been incorporating Dr. Ben's SMaRT slow maximum resistance training program in addition to his dietary changes and addressing his type 1 diabetes and losing weight. And we just really wanted to talk to Ben about his feedback on Andrew's great successes. So thanks for joining us today, Ben.
Okay, my pleasure.
Let us know a little bit of your thoughts about Andrew's success.
Well, background again, you just heard Andrew's podcast. He's a type 1 diabetic, and he was really enthusiastic about starting the resistance program, the SMaRT program. And he would call me every few days to tell me about his progress. And it may not be conceivable to most people, but the results happened rather quickly, and in his case, extraordinarily quickly. Within 2 weeks, he called me, which means he did 4 15-minute workouts in those 2 weeks. He lost an additional 6 or 7 pounds, and this is not a huge person. It's not like he's obese in any way. And he said he lost, 3 inches off his pant size, and which is remarkable. He did, and this was before he did a 4 or 5 day fast when he had traveled back to New York. So that obviously could have had something to do with it. But in the long term, I guess his insulin requirement is halved. I mean, it started in the 120s, then he was down to 26, and now he's down to 13 or 14, I believe. And there's an indication he might have to go even lower. So what's happening is his insulin sensitivity is increasing enormously from a combination of a low carb or keto. He's actually almost carnivore, I think, at this point, and the high intensity SMaRT training. And because it gets you the maximum kind of synergistic bang for your buck for activity. And I'm not totally surprised, although he's a little bit of an outlier, because that's hugely quick response. I mean, 4 workouts, and now I think he's 5 weeks into it, and he's down 16 pounds and has halved, and probably going to have to reduce his insulin. And don't forget, he's type 1. So he's doing remarkably well. Energy, going on 5-mile hikes. And this is something I see rather commonly. I do see people that are doing good, solid, low carb, even keto diets that still have a high fasting insulin, or higher than they'd like. And once they incorporate the exercise, that thing drops. It's not unusual for me to see, 25 to 15 in 6 weeks, fasting insulin levels. And that's a great kind of a bang for your buck with, from 6, 8, 10, 15-minute exercise sessions. And so what I think is going on, a little bit of science, a little bit of background, is many of your insulin receptors are located in your skeletal muscle. And that's what we're working, obviously, when we exercise. So now what we're doing is we're activating this whole process of using glycogen, because when we do high-intensity exercise, we deplete glycogen. When glycogen is depleted in your muscles, they become more receptive because they want to store that life or death fuel back again to have it. So now they become more receptive to glucose, take it out of the bloodstream. And so this whole process is magnified, exaggerated, accelerated through the combination of low carb eating and this high intensity exercise. I mean, the science is pretty simple, and it's also pretty consistent. This thing works across the board. And obviously, even if you're not type 1 diabetic and you're type 2, you're still insulin resistant. And this is a very powerful combination of behaviors to get that thing fixed and get you back on the right track.
Yeah, maybe you could explain to those listening how activating those muscle fibers, activating those energy pathways is helping somebody become more insulin sensitive instead of insulin resistant.
Well, again, if we're using these type 2B fibers, the fibers that I keep stressing are the ones we want to get to when we go to that momentary muscular failure. When we get to those fight or flight muscle fibers, they rely exclusively on glycolytic, meaning sugar burning processes, okay? So when you start to drain glycogen out of the muscle at this accelerated rate, the body a little bit panics and says, hey, I'm running out of this fuel that keeps me alive. I need for emergencies. So what does it do? So for people that are trying to lose weight and get into their body fat stores, this is really important. When we have this adrenaline response, this fight or flight response in that particular muscle that we've taken to failure, there's a release of free fatty acids, which just means that we need a backup fuel. Our brain is saying, listen, I'm running out of glycogen really fast. And if this has to continue, I'm out of luck. So what do? So it releases fat out of triglyceride storage into free fatty acid as a backup fuel. And so now when we get done with this workout, the SMaRT workout, what's happening? We have all this excess fatty acid energy flowing around. So our metabolic rate stays increased, stays at a higher level, 18, 36 hours in some cases. So now, as opposed to conventional aerobic exercise, which borrows fat from a cycle and then pays back that fat that is borrowed for that activity by getting hungry and slowing down metabolism, this high intensity work drives fat out of storage, uses it, and then we're not hungry because we have this excess free fatty acid backup flowing in our systems, and we have that little bit of energy that you feel from an adrenaline kind of response. So your metabolism, metabolic rate stays higher. In other words, you're actually burning calories at a higher rate without doing anything, just because you've raised this metabolic pathway that generated this extra energy out of stored triglycerides, stored body fat.
Yeah, I can attest to that too. We were just talking about this. This is our year anniversary, 12 months of Doug and I doing Dr. Ben's program, and not being hungry after a workout when I was typically really ravenous and tired after, training, running. My one thing, it's impossible to lose weight when you come back from a run or a workout and all you want to do is start eating again because your fuel is diminished and your body's looking for that. Plus, you keep moving around. We get home from a workout. We've usually done some errands, gone grocery shopping. We come back and put it all away, and we still have energy to go and do something else or go back and do our work before we eat. Doug even does them fasted a lot of times. So there is an excess fuel release that keeps us through the rest of our afternoon. We happen to work out in the afternoon, but think about if you do it in the morning, how much energy is left over for you to do all the other things you want to do without using it all working out. And that brings me back, because maybe we haven't explained it. This might be the first time we've had you on our podcast. We've done a lot of interviews with you on our blog and on our YouTube channel, which you can all look up very easily. Ben Boccicchio, Bocchi and Cchi.
Dr. Ben.
In our blog sections and on our YouTube video, he has a wonderful book called 15 Minutes to Fitness, which is listed in our great book section. But just to tell people quickly before we wrap up, it's 15 minutes. You use each muscle group, each large muscle group, bring that to failure in 15 minutes. I pretty much said it. Probably.
Yeah, well, what happens is, since we have these receptors, these insulin receptors, and we have actually two kinds of benefits of exercise, local and global. Local meaning when the muscle itself is working, the bicep, for example, it is demanding globally that the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, the hormone system, the nervous system, and obviously the skeletal system has to support the impetus of this workout, of this demand. So as far as overall metabolic health, the muscle system is probably the most powerful organ to drive those kind of pathways. What are the pathways? Releasing fat, so using stored body fat, increasing muscle mass and activity, increasing mitochondrial function. In other words, mitochondria are little batteries that we have in our muscles and in all our cells, actually, and they supply energy. They make the energy, the ATP, finally happen. And when you want to enhance the number or the capacity of those mitochondria, the only way to do that is to drive a demand for more energy. They'll stay the way they are unless we want bigger batteries, okay, more powerful batteries. So we want to go from a AAA battery to a car battery. We want to make these things vigorous and youthful. And a very interesting fact is that human mitochondria do not age as a consequence of chronological time. Okay, in many species they do. But mitochondria in 60, 70, 80-year-old people can return to youthful 30, 40-year-old levels if we induce the right kind of, if we don't inhibit their energy production by poor diet, and if we instigate a response that requires energy like high intensity exercise. So as far as the ultimate anti-aging kind of a situation, this combination of low carb eating, keto eating, and high intensity exercise is just a wonderful project. I mean, this is how you do it. This is, health, anti-aging, energy, vigor, this stuff all really occurs. And there are pathways that we've talked about, the pathways of stimulating some of these hormones, like hormone sensitive lipase is a hormone that tells the fat cells to release energy. And when we're dormant, when we become glycated with sugars, then lipoprotein lipase, which is the one that tells us to store, it's the enzyme to store fat, happens. So we can change all of these pathways pretty simply by this combination of high intensity exercise, low carb eating, then obviously, stress reduction, good sleep. But those are the two main characters in driving this metabolic health.
Yeah, really powerful combinations. We all want to age backwards, right? I can attest to that. I turned 50 in November, and I had already been 4 months into the program with Doug doing Ben's program. Leaned out. My arms are a perfect example of leaning out. Yeah. People have seen me who hadn't seen me in a year and say, wow, I can notice around your face and neck. And you're losing weight, right? So I lost about 12 pounds, and I'm putting on more muscle in the last year. I'm excited to do another DEXA scan coming up maybe in the next couple of months. We need to arrange that just so I can take a look at what my lean body mass is compared to BMI, fat mass index.
Right. Let me do my one interesting slide. If you're in the top third for your age and gender and muscle strength, it doesn't matter if you're obese, a smoker, whatever, top third in muscle strength, you are 40% less likely to die of cancer and 40% more likely to live to be 100. Just as that factor of muscle strength. It's a very, very powerful correlative to aging and to metabolic health.
Yeah, that's something that I personally feel empowered by, and hopefully we can empower more people with that information. We all want to be stronger into our older age. We want to be stable. We want to be able to move. We want to be able to lift things. We want to be able to not fall when we get into our 80s and 90s. And that's always a big problem area for our elderly people. So starting the process now, where we're putting on muscle and having a healthy skeletal muscular system, which also leads to, we're going to wrap up here in just 1 second, but you talk about it helping your whole system and your cardiovascular system.
The most technically aerobic you can be metabolically is during recovery from anaerobic or high intensity exercise. It's a little complex, but trust me on that. You cannot be more aerobic, purely fat burning, than during recovery from anaerobic exercise. Sounds like an oxymoron, but it's just the fact. You burn fat like crazy if you do high intensity exercise.
It's brilliant. Thanks so much for joining us today. And we'll put the links below the video and on the podcast host page and on YouTube for Dr. Ben's book, 15 Minutes of Fitness. You can find out more. He's very good at explaining everything with great analogies, simplistically, but very in depth as well at the same time. And hope to see you guys again soon. Thanks so much. Thanks, Ben.
My pleasure.
So you'll notice that we haven't had any commercials at all during this podcast, and we intend to keep it like that if we possibly can. But at the same time, the work that we're doing and the efforts that we're going to get the clinical guidelines done, there's just so much to do. And in order to really, for this to be sustainable, we need your help. And so what we're asking you to do is go and take a look at our Patreon account. There's actually quite a few options there. It provides you with options to actually go onto our site, and there's membership options there where you can get access to all our video content and other perks of being a member, or even just $1 a month, become a patron. And you can find that in patreon.com/LowCarbUSA. I'll put it in the show notes and in the episode notes so that you can find it. and help us to change the world.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people take a look at the conference registrations, and I think they immediately assume that, from a distance, that these might be money-making endeavors that we're doing with these conferences. And it's hard to admit, and it's hard to tell people that we really aren't making any money from these. All 11 of the events that we've done have not been a profitable endeavor. We've literally had to dip into our credit, basically. It wasn't anything. It wasn't like we actually had a pocket to dip into and put money into. We've had to take loans and get a lot of credit for these events. So any little bit that you can help, every ticket that's sold, every little bit of $1 a month in a Patreon account will help us to fund our endeavors and fund the programs, so that we continue to do some of these other things that are free content. The project management that we're doing on the clinical guidelines will really go a long way.